public school down the street. And sorry, I'm gonna say got it to know that I'm being recorded.
Sorry about that.
No problem, not at all. And singing in the church choir and those types of things, and a pretty wholesome, I would have to say, Girl Scout troops and family rides in the station wagon on the weekends and that type of thing growing up. When I was 7 years old, we moved to Louisville, Kentucky, and I grew up for the most part in Kentucky. I lived there until I was 16 years old. And Kentucky is an interesting place. If you've not been from there, it's notable for a number of things, one of which is one of the highest poverty states in the entire United States, and struggles with that issue. And also very much, especially in Louisville, a mix of the Midwest, the South, and kind of all of those politics rolled up into one. And then my parents moved back to Ohio in the middle of high school, and then I went off to college and so on. When I was little, I really wanted to be a teacher. I loved going to school. I loved my teachers. I had very extensive, lots of kids play school, but I'm not quite sure that every kid played school with like a grade book written out for all of their students. I had a very extensive and organized school that I like to do. And interestingly, my play became so extensive that the neighbor boy, who was a couple of years younger, would come over and be one of my students. And he was actually dyslexic, or he had dyslexia. And in our school play, he really made progress in reading, to the extent that his parents really wanted this to continue, this school play that we were doing, because it was working so well with him. And I was loving the chance to be a little teacher.
So you wanted to be a teacher. You went away to school. So tell us where you went to school.
I went to Brown University in Providence, Rhode Island, far away, and only person that I knew that was going there. I remember as my parents were driving me up, I realized that I had decided to go to school many states away from where my family lived, didn't know anybody that was there, and that it was going to be really different. And I said to myself, I remember, doing that talk to myself, saying, maybe you won't make any friends. maybe you won't like it. That's okay. Just focus on your studies. You'll survive it. And I had no idea how wonderful it was going to be, how much it would open up all kinds of opportunities and possibilities, and what a wonderful, rigorous education I would get there, and lifelong friends that I would make. But I was just stunned by the difference when I started there.
Oh yeah, if you grew up in the Midwest in Ohio and Kentucky, and then headed up to Brown, man, that would have been a culture shock.
Yeah, there were all these supposedly very smart kids at Brown that would say, "Oh, you're from Kentucky? I've never met anyone from Kentucky, but I've been to Nashville once." And I'd say, "Nashville's not Kentucky."
So. They were very smart, huh?
Far from
exactly.
it. Far from it. So what did you major in?
I majored in comparative literature. So I started out studying biology and chemistry, and then I took an incredible course in African novels, and I got very interested in literature that was post-colonial literature, basically literature that was written about the colonial experience in Asia and Africa. And that put me into this really interesting world of ideas and politics, and understanding the politics of those novels. And that will be a recurring theme, as you will hear, just the importance of language, the importance of how we use language to make meaning in our world and our understanding. And I had some wonderful teachers. So I also had the opportunity to do study abroad during my undergrad, and I spent 6 months in southern Germany. And so because of that, I was able to do a comparative literature degree with the German and the English language.
So you learned German along the way, I assume.
I did.
Das ist gut.
Sehr.
Sorry.
Shall we do the rest of the interview auf Deutsch? Is that what everybody's ready for on a Friday morning?
Ein bisschen Deutsch. So you majored in comparative literature, but did you still have that desire to teach at the end?
I did. I had an extraordinary experience at the end of my senior year, where I graduated in 1997, and so many of us potentially remember it was actually November 9th. So this is coming up as well. November 9th, 1989 is the day that the Berlin Wall fell. And I'm looking at faces, remembering many of us at different ages at that time, remembering how extraordinary that was. The end of the Cold War, it really came out of the blue in so many ways. So I graduated in 1997, and at that time, the Bosch company, which makes appliances and spark plugs and so on, has a large educational foundation in Germany, and they provided a fellowship for American, Polish, French, and Czech students, or people who had just graduated, to go and live and work in university towns all across the former East Germany. And it was this part of their investment in cultural exchange between West and East. So I was sent for a year to a town called Greifswald, which is on the Baltic Sea coast. It's about an hour west of the Polish border. 60,000 people. When I got there, it was close to 20% unemployment. Strong rise in the right wing neo-Nazi pieces. They had a nuclear energy, Soviet era nuclear energy facility that had employed 25,000 people, and after sort of the efficiencies and the changes, now employed 250 people. So just a place going through a number of changes. I lived in the sort of, we've all seen those communist block apartments. Lived there. We had one telephone for the entire apartment block, for all the apartments, and had really a marvelous time getting to be a part of a culture that was, all my family, all those Midwestern Ohio farmers are basically German, but getting to be a part of a culture that was nonetheless so different and going through so much change. And I taught there. I taught American Studies, and I taught English language at the university. It's a wonderful place. I then spent another half of a year teaching at the University of Rostock, which is a little bit larger, and at the University of Greifswald. And then I just took whatever weird translation jobs I could find along the way. Then I came back to North Carolina. I came to North Carolina then because my best friend growing up in Kentucky was a Guilford College grad. So I moved back here after about another year and a half in Germany.
Wow. So you really were a glutton for comparative cultures.
Yeah, it was a wonderful experience. I'll just tell one kind of funny story is that I was walking along the kind of the main drag in Berlin. It's called Unter den Linden. And this guy came up to me doing sort of a man on the street interview for some television news program, and interviewed me and wanted to know my opinion on the move of the capital of Germany from Bonn, which had been in the West, to Berlin. It hadn't moved at that point. And I remember thinking to myself, okay, this newscaster thinks I'm German. I'm not really in a position to talk about this. And I was like, but you know what? I actually have an opinion on this move of the capital from Bonn to Berlin. So I told him what I thought about it. And that's somehow, I think, maybe there's a little news snippet of me pretending to be an informed German citizen on issues like this. But yeah, it was a wonderful experience, made great friends, and they're still friends to this day.
That's wonderful. So you got to tell us, what did you tell him? Were you in favor of the change or not?
I thought it was overall a very good idea. It was awfully expensive, at a time when there was such high unemployment in the East. It was hard to justify the spending, but in the end, the move probably needed to be made. Nuanced approach, right? All of these are complex.
And in fact, it was. And I know the Western Germans have spent an enormous amount of money in the reintegration, and it's still going on. But well, that's fascinating. So then you decided to come back to the United States after a year and a half of doing this, and you came to Greensboro?
Durham.
To Durham, okay.
Mhm.
And what did you do?
I think I arrived around the summertime. I got to go to Brevard and go to canoe camp, and I spent the summer teaching at a summer camp. I taught canoeing and kayaking to a bunch of kids in Durham, which was fantastic. I still love to do that stuff. And then I started a job through the Public Allies program, which some of you may have heard of. It's one of the AmeriCorps programs. And at that time, we had 20, I think, allies that were working in Raleigh, working in nonprofits in Raleigh and Chapel Hill, Orange County, and in Durham. And so I was assigned to Mary E. Phillips High School in Wake County. And it was actually through the Wake AHEC, the Area Health Education Center. And I worked with the students at Mary E. Phillips. I did after school things. I helped out a lot in classrooms, tutoring and helping people along the way. And I helped also for the students that particularly wanted to go into health careers. This is a high school that is an alternative public high school. It had night school. It had an on-site child care center for parents or for students who were parenting. And I had a wonderful education there in the struggles of teenagers that had dropped out, that had become pregnant during high school. And these were the ones who were staying in the fight and trying to support them to high school completion.
Wow.
Yeah, so that sparked my interest, and I decided eventually to go back to, I ended up working at a middle school in Durham after that, and then I decided to go back. I really, I'd had this wonderful undergraduate education, but I really wanted to study human development. And so I decided to apply to social work school at Carolina and went there and did the dual degree in social work and public health. So really, I mean, somebody was just asking me yesterday, like, how did you get from literature? And it really was through this public school teaching and having the experience of teaching and working with adolescents that got me from focusing on literature and those things into the world of social work and public health.
So then you worked in that in that area for a while. And what did you do?
Yeah, my first job out of graduate school was at Alamance County Health Department. And this may make people giggle a little bit, but this was I had done a lot of work with Alamance County while I was in grad school. And they sent me this job description for something called the bioterrorism coordinator. And I read it, and it was all about this concept of like an anthrax attack in Burlington, North Carolina, and how are we going to defend ourselves against that? And you all remember this comes out, obviously, of the 2001, both the
9/11.
both the attacks on 9/11, and what we sometimes forget is that the date that the first anthrax letter was found in Senator Daschle's office was 9/18. It was 1 week later. And so there was, at that time, this was the Bush administration, a lot of funding made available for readiness at the local level. So that I actually read the job description and I thought to myself, this is so strange and interesting. And of course, because of my literature background, my first thought, honest to God, was I could write a novel about this. Mm-hmm. And then I did the job, and 6 weeks in, it was no longer strange. I was totally like, this makes perfect sense. I got to meet, I loved the opportunity to meet all the people that worked in fire and law enforcement and EMS. Those were not folks that had been a part of my professional life before. I found the connection that I felt with them was that we both had this real helping desire. They had gone into careers because they wanted to help people. I had gone into my career because I wanted to help people. Most of them were men, and probably more conservative than I was in a lot of ways, but I really appreciated the opportunity. We had very different life experiences, and I appreciated the opportunity to get to know and understand where they were coming from. And we did a lot of good work together. They were obviously subject matter experts, but I could help them get in a meeting together and facilitate a meeting that got stuff done, and help to put a lot of plans together in our community. And I appreciated that. Made again some strong connections that exist today.
So you've been a person that's brought people together in a lot of different ways in Germany and in this former Eastern Bloc area with old nuclear plants, and then in the U.S. here, and then you show up in Alamance County and you're engaged in bioterrorism and all these things. So let's fast forward to where you are today. How did you get there, and what's your aim for the Institute of Medicine?
Thank you so much. So I think many of you have met me just in the past couple of months. I've started at the NCIOM in January, and prior to that, I was the leader of the Department of Healthy Communities at Cone Health. And a lot of our responsibilities there, which was primarily Guilford, Alamance, and Rockingham counties, were in the medical safety net, the provision of access to care, and also the integration of social determinants. So we were responsible for the community health assessments. We worked hand in hand with local health departments, community-based organizations, and we were very, very interested in our work about taking many of the lessons of the turn to value-based care and applying that to the lowest income members who really suffered from the worst effects of access to social resources, and also struggled really with consistent access to care. I also at that time began a doctoral program in public administration at NC State. And this just comes out of my natural intellectual curiosity, and started to work I'm working on a dissertation now on the policy process on Medicaid expansion in Kentucky. I'm really interested in how that, I'm really interested in how regular people understand our government and how regular people try and intervene in our government. And to me, that comes out of this bedrock commitment to our democracy and the preciousness of it, and the fact that I want to be a part of making it stronger. So coming to the NCIOM for me has felt like the ability to take that sort of on the ground convening experience, the work of trying to knit together systems that often work separately, combined with my real interest in the policy process, and my commitment to common ground, and to the evidence base, and to moving those things forward. I think you asked a little bit about my vision for the NCIOM, and we've helped to articulate some of our strongest values since we've come here, and those are consensus-driven, evidence-based, solution-focused, and with commitments to equity and to empathy. And I'm sorry, I forgot nonpartisan. That's one of the biggest ones as well. Yeah. And, for us, we're trying to talk about that, not just in terms of you either are this or aren't this, but rather that there's a set of behaviors that corresponds to those values being true for you. They're about self-awareness. They're about building your skills to understand the evidence base. They're about listening to understand, and things like that along the way. I want us to continue to build a strong relation with legislators. Again, we're not an advocacy group, but we want them to be able to trust us to give them straightforward information. I want us to continue to help to take forward a common ground approach to understanding that health equity involves all of us and benefits all of us to work towards those outcomes. I think we're really interested in helping to carry forward more and stronger awareness of healthy NC 2030 work, which was work that the NCIOM did prior to my coming on and prior to the pandemic, but which seems even more important now as we emerge from the pandemic and set priorities for North Carolina.
You're promising that we will emerge from this, right?
We will have endemic COVID. We will emerge from this phase, and then we will have endemic COVID. So we will be at the learn to live with it phase.
Yeah, I'm afraid that's true. Yeah. So Catherine has a question. How do you see Medicaid expansion in these last hanger-on states? I mean, if you were studying Kentucky with Mitch McConnell and Rand Paul, what do you see here in North Carolina?
I think that's a great question. I think we have operated in North Carolina for a while that we either have no Medicaid expansion or we have a full Medicaid expansion, as it looks like in other states. And I think where we are right now, if you favor Medicaid expansion, is to take this clear-eyed approach that we're in a period of incremental progress in Medicaid expansion. I thought it was very interesting that in this session, we saw bipartisan support for the expansion postpartum to 12 months from 6 weeks. And that there's, of course, well, I'm sure some people know what's in the state budget right now. I certainly don't, but there's strong talk that that could be included in the budget. The question is, who next, right? What potential eligibility groups would be a part of incremental expansion? This is painful, I think, for people who've been working so hard for full expansion to hear. But from my point of view, that's a clear-eyed view of a pragmatic way forward with our current legislature. I think there is, if you look at the Kentucky plan, which was declared invalid twice by a federal judge, it offered a more conservative path for conservative legislatures to get behind. It is the one that includes the work requirement and so on. That path is no longer available, again, because it was deemed, you can't do that according to the federal judge. So, right. So I think that's where we are with Medicaid expansion. I think, I wouldn't want to say that there's no way to get the full expansion, but for me, it looks like incremental progress, which is one way policy moves, right?
Yeah. So Kathy, as you know, the North Carolina Serious Illness Coalition, our coalition here, was born out of the Task Force on Serious Illness Care at the NCIOM. Mm-hmm. So what kind of advice or vision would you share with us here almost 2 years into our existence?
What a great question. I think you already know this, but it is the relationships, right? That some of the, for one, I think it's extraordinary the legislative progress that this group has already made. I think that's exciting. I think you took advantage of the sort of zeitgeist and the appetite for change that has come out of the pandemic. And I think it's relationships, it's priorities, and it's long haul work, right? So settling in for the things that are going to be harder and understanding, again, that sometimes, I guess, I just talked about incremental progress. That's one way that policy moves. And then interestingly, you can do this incremental thing and then all of a sudden it shoots, right? And so we saw with the pandemic, in some ways, some of the fact that policy just shot forward in ways that we wouldn't have expected in the past. And I think that's what the incremental work and the consistent pushing and the consistent relationship building sets you up for those bigger jumps that sometimes come when you least expect it.
Well, I hope that's true. That's exciting.
Yeah, there's a whole theory about it. You want
the zeitgeist, you're still with your German there.
Yeah, there we go. Exactly. So it comes in handy.
So what is next year for the NCIOM?
What's next year?
Yeah.
Well, we're excited that I'm not sure we get to announce all of this yet, but we'll give you the sneak preview that we're going to be working with Foundation for Health Leadership and Innovation on a project to better understand how oral health could be structured if it were to be a part of Medicaid managed care. It's currently a carve out. So really
Mhm.
trying to build consensus among the many stakeholders so that if that were to be carved back in, there's a way that works and that gets to the outcomes that are necessary for that. We're also doing, we're also very excited that we've had funding from the Duke Endowment to work on a healthy aging task force that will start sooner than we'll probably be ready quite for that to start, but starting soon in January. And that group has been working for a while with DAS and with DPH to put some things together related to social isolation, related to injury prevention and nutrition, and a couple of other focusing issues. We're also really interested in working on this issue of nursing shortage and nursing retention and transformations to the nursing profession. So we don't have funding for that yet, but we are talking with a number of stakeholders and trying to put together what would be a good focus for that and the animating questions. We'll also be finishing up next year task forces on pandemic preparedness and on the future of local public health about mid-year 2022. The other thing I'd love for people to know is that we're making some changes in 2022 to the North Carolina Medical Journal. And you'll see starting in the January issue that we are going to focus in calendar year 2022 on the domains that are mentioned in Healthy North Carolina 2030. So the all of those 21 indicators that were in Healthy North Carolina 2030 were organized into social and economic factors, health behaviors, physical environment, clinical care, and health outcomes. And we'll have an issue devoted to each of those. And a little bit of a change in the types of articles that you'll see in there. So there'll be a data article each time specifically to trends. There'll be a sort of a policy review, an interview with a clinician, and also the voices of people with lived experience related to that in the medical journal. So a good place again to return our focus back to Healthy North Carolina 2030.
Amazing. Well, Kathy Colville, we are excited to have had this chance to have a glimpse into your background and who you are. And this has been great.
Oh, so
Thank
fun.
you so
Thank
much.
you.
Dankeschön.
Bitte sehr.
So everybody, y'all have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you next week. Thanks so much.